The HTC 10 may just be the biggest leap a company has made in a while. Hello everybody, I'm Crystal Laura, and this is the HTC 10 versus the HTC One M9. There's only been little changes made to the flagship of HTC this year, but these small tweaks really go a long way. Both phones are made from a very high-grade aluminum and have a nice curve around the back, but we no longer have a brushed metallic finish on the HTC 10, which makes it look a lot cleaner and sleeker. There's a huge chamfered edge running around the border, which has been a little controversial, but once you see the 10 in person, chances are you'll end up loving it because it reflects light and adds a little pop to it. The camera on the 10 protrudes a bit more than the one found on the M9, but it ends up taking less space overall, and there's also a lot less branding and text going on thanks to the new FFC guidelines, which helps the 10 look even less cluttered. As we turn the phones over to their fronts, once again you have a much more simple design with the HTC 10. Yes, the HTC One M9 that we have is a gold model, but even if you were to get the phone in a different color, the front, top, and bottom bezels are never a true black. But this year, HTC decided to make the top and bottom bezels black regardless of the style of the back. And that really just helps blend everything in and give a bigger focus to the display. The One M9 had a large black border around the display along with a black HTC bezel wedged between the screen and the bottom bezel. And even though the 10's bezels are similar in size, the unified coloring almost makes them appear smaller than the M9's. The buttons on both phones can be found on the right side. And even though the M9 had a great textured power button, the 10's power button's texturized pattern is much more exaggerated and really helps the user find the button just using their finger. All the buttons on the M9 set a little too flush to the body, but with the 10 they have much more tactile feedback and they need a good push to be triggered. Other than that, the phones feel almost identical to one another. The 10 is ever so slightly taller and wider, but this is to make more room for the 0.2mm larger screen. The 10 is also a little thinner at 9mm versus 9.6, but it's a little heavier. Both phones have some of the best build quality and they feel great in the hand, but when it comes to aesthetics, the 10 is miles ahead. When it comes to display, it has been greatly improved on the 10 this year, and on top of that, we get a slightly larger one too at 5.2 inches versus the 5-inch on the One M9. Both are LCD panels, but with the 10, we have the newer Super LCD 5 technology over the Super LCD 3 found on the M9. The panel itself is a little tougher too, thanks to Gorilla Glass 4 instead of 3, and of course, HTC has finally given Quad HD a chance with the HTC 10. But it does make sense that the One M9 stuck with only a 1080p display with a smaller 5-inch screen. And you won't really notice any extra sharpness really with the 10 over the M9, but what you will notice though is the overall quality of the displays. The 10's is much more enjoyable. The M9's display is very cool and almost has a greenish hue to it, which looks very unappealing. The 10's is much more warmer and is able to get a lot closer to true whites. Colors are also crazy vibrant on the HTC 10, almost as close as the saturation of a Galaxy phone. And with the M9, not only is it much more dull than the 10, but it's one of the dullest displays of a 2015 smartphone. With the 10 being one of the best LCD displays we've seen, and the M9 being one of the worst, it's very easy to pick a winner here. Now with hardware, this is an area where HTC has removed a lot of key features in order to help with the HTC 10's design. First, it's not really a feature, it's more the way the hardware is designed, but the vibration on the 10 is crazy loud. It's one of the loudest vibration motors on a phone, even louder than most volume settings. The M9's is much quieter, but very strong. It's definitely worth noting. Now, if you take a look at the top of these phones, you'll see the absence of an IR blaster on the 10, which is a trend that we've been seeing on recent smartphones. With the M9, you can control televisions, sound systems, cable boxes, and more right from your phone. But not a lot of people use this, which is why it has been removed. And remember how I was saying the HTC 10's front is much cleaner and nicer looking than the M9's? Well, there is a major downside to this, being the boom sound front-facing stereo speaker grills on the M9. These speakers are one of the things that made HTC phones stand out. The sound quality is incredible with the M9. They're very crisp and clear while still having a lot of bass to them. They're dual front-facing as well, which creates a very balanced listening experience when watching videos, and they're aimed right at you. No better speakers are found on a phone. The 10 also has what HTC calls boom sound speakers, and they do sound nice, but they don't come close to the quality of the M9. There is one huge hardware addition though with the 10, and that is a fingerprint scanner. It's located at the bottom of the device under the screen, and it's actually one of the best scanners I've used. It's very fast, but more importantly, it's reliable. It's a great way to secure your device without adding any extra hassle. Like on the M9, you'll have to resort to passwords, patterns, or other ways to keep your phone secure, which can get annoying when you're doing it dozens of times per day. On either side of the scanner, we have capacitive back and recent apps buttons instead of on-screen buttons like on the M9, which gives you just that much more screen real estate. Performance is a huge step up on the HTC 10, which is expected with your typical 2016 flagship specs. We got a Snapdragon 820 versus 810, Adreno 530 versus 430, and 4 gigs of RAM versus 3. Now, the One M9 is using the A10, which is a great processor, but unfortunately it uses an older version of it, allowing the M9 to get uncomfortably hot at times, which cripples performance even more. With both phones at low temperatures, I threw some Geekbench benchmark tests on them to see how they rank up with one another, and the 10 scores much higher in single and multi-core rankings. Games load way faster on the 10 and they have smooth playback. You're just going to be a lot less frustrated using the HTC 10 with its fast performance. Now, battery life is actually pretty similar on each. There's a slight boost with the 10 with a 160 mAh larger battery, but that larger battery has to deal with the higher resolution display. So on both, you're looking at an average of about 4 to 4 hours and 20 minutes of screen on time per day. You should easily expect both phones to last you an entire day. Now, when you charge at the end of the day, you'll have a better time with the 10 thanks to the addition of USB Type-C. Software is another night and day difference between these phones. Both phones are running Android Marshmallow. However, just by looking at the M9, you would think this was a phone running Android 4.4 KitKat. The HTC 10 follows almost all material design guidelines. In fact, the entire pull-down menu is the same pull-down menu you'd find on a stock Android device with some added features. The recent app screen is also almost similar to stock Android, and so is the settings menu. Now, yes, a lot of users love a stock Android look and feel, but of course not all users are going to like it. And a lot of OEM skins on Android look nothing like stock, but are still quite good. However, with the HTC One M9, it's the opposite. HTC Sense on the M9 is a great skin and it's loaded with features, but aesthetically it looks very cluttered and unappealing. And the pull-down notification shade looks the same, but with huge shortcut icons with text in all capital letters, which actually makes some of the settings names cut off. The recent app screen on the M9 looks to be pretty much the same one we found on Android KitKat, and it works very well, but it definitely looks outdated. Sense is also a lot less bloated with the 10. There's no silly games or other sponsored apps, which are things that you will definitely find all throughout the M9. But feature-wise, both phones are very similar, with lock screen shortcuts, theme store, and blink feed, which is a page where all your social media lives, all in one neatly organized page where you can quickly see what's going on in your world. HTC Sense overall is a great take on Android on both phones, but design-wise, the HTC 10 once again is miles ahead. Camera was one of the most disappointing features of the M9, especially when it came to lower lit photos. We got 20 megapixels with an aperture of 2.2 and no optical image stabilization. The 10 goes with the 2016 camera setup that we're seeing on almost every flagship now, of 12 megapixels with larger pixel size, 1.8 aperture, and optical image stabilization. In outdoors, there are some great improvements with the 10, adding some extra color, a bit more contrast, and images appear to be sharper with more detail, even with less megapixels. The M9 appears to be a lot softer, smudging away those details, and there also seems to be a bit of a haze on top of the M9's photos, with the M9 also being prone to overexposure. The HTC 10 does overexpose in certain areas though, but compared to the M9, it's much better at handling bright areas. HDR is also much better with the 10, even if it looks a little unnatural. Now, there's a huge difference when it comes to low light photos. The M9 has a slower shutter speed, and that mixed with the lack of optical image stabilization creates very blurry photos even with the steadiest of hands. It loses all detail, has a lot more grain, and its colors suffer as well. Turning on HDR usually helps phone cameras take better low light photos, but it gets even worse with the M9. It takes a long time to stitch together the shot, so every time you'll end up with an even blurrier image, and the image will be way too bright. Interesting enough, the HTC One M9's front-facing 4-megapixel camera is actually a lot better than the 10's 5-megapixel one. You'll get a lot more detail on the M9, and that's thanks to its ultra-pixel technology, with the pixel size on this sensor being very large. It exposes a lot better, has a bit extra contrast, and its colors are very vibrant. The 10 selfie cam does have one thing going for it though, and that's optical image stabilization, which is a first for a smartphone selfie camera. So video recording is much smoother, which is helpful for things like vlogging. The 10's video also destroys the M9, mostly thanks to the addition of optical image stabilization. This shot is very steady compared to the jerky video of the M9. Also, the M9's video just seems to be a little too dark to enjoy. Now, the HTC 10 isn't going to blow anybody away. It lacks that one huge feature that most other flagships have, but in almost every department, the 10 blows the HTC One M9 out of the water. The screen has better colors, brightness, and resolution, the design is much sleeker, the software is toned down and less bloated, we have a new fingerprint scanner, and the camera produces pictures you can be proud of. So sure, you lose the great quality of the M9's front-facing boom sound speakers, but I'm sure the majority of users won't mind if that's what it takes to create a phone that's years ahead of the M9. Well, that is it for this comparison video. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments below, be sure to let me know which phone you think is better. And for the full in-depth review of the HTC 10, click that video that's playing above. Make sure you head on over to androidauthority.com for the full in-depth comparison. And subscribe for more videos like this because we are your source for all things Android.